Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, January 29, 2026. The Senate does not advance a package of 6 fiscal year 2026 spending bills ahead of Friday's deadline to avoid a partial government shutdown. But senators and the White House are reportedly working on a deal to pass 5 bills as a group and separate out the Homeland Security funding and extend it for a short period of time to allow for more talks on how to reform immigration and customs enforcement. President Donald Trump holds a cabinet meeting, his first of the year, but does not call on Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem or Attorney General Pam Bondi to speak and does not take any reporters' questions. White House Border Czar Tom Homan says he has ordered federal immigration authorities to work on an eventual drawdown plan for federal law enforcement in Minnesota, and that operations until then will be targeted, and he is, quote, staying till the problem's gone. The suspect in the attack on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, at a town hall this week faces federal charges as she blames President Donald Trump's rhetoric for threats to her safety. We get updates from the White House cabinet meeting on the war in Ukraine, the U.S. military buildup near Iran, and the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire Phase 2. Plus, the president's National Security Agency director nominee testifies before the Senate Intelligence Committee. The Senate Agriculture Committee passes a bill to regulate the digital assets market, and some in Europe are talking about possibly boycotting World Cup matches in the U.S. Story from the Hill. Senators say that negotiations over a stalled government funding package are hung up over the question of how long to temporarily fund the Department of Homeland Security at current levels to give the White House and Senate Democrats more time to negotiate immigration enforcement reforms. Republican senators said Thursday that the White House is on board with Democrats' request to strip a Homeland Security appropriations bill out of a 6-bill government funding package that needs to pass by 11:59 p.m. Friday to avoid a government shutdown. But Republican and Democratic negotiators can't agree on the length of a continuing resolution, or CR, to temporarily fund the Homeland Security Department while the White House and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer hammer out reforms to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. That was from The Hill. The day began with Democrats blocking legislation to fund the Department of Homeland Security and several other agencies. The 6 bills rolled into one, and the leaders of the Senate Appropriations Committee spoke on the Senate floor before that procedural vote. We begin with Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, the committee chair.
There has understandably been a great deal of attention focused on the Homeland Security portion of the package, given the events of the past week. The horrific shooting death of Alex Petrie must be thoroughly and impartially investigated, and President Trump has promised that it will be investigated both impartially and thoroughly. The Homeland Security funding bill includes important provisions that we put in during the negotiations that would make such incidents less likely to occur. For example, it includes $20 million for body-worn cameras, which help to protect both law enforcement officials and those with whom they are interacting. It includes $2 million to ensure that training requirements include how to de-escalate an encounter with protesters. Yet another important provision of the bill empowers the Inspector General to review and investigate detention centers. These are all critical reforms, but it does not mean that we cannot do more. But to do more, Mr. President, we need to get onto the bill so that we can make the critical decisions that are being negotiated by leadership in both the House and the Senate and the White House.
Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, Appropriations Committee chair on the Senate floor before today's procedural vote to begin debate on the 6-bill spending package, and that vote failed. The Portland Press-Herald reporting from Maine that Senator Collins said Thursday morning that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has ended its large-scale operation in Maine just over a week after federal officials launched what they dubbed Operation Catch of the Day, The Department of Homeland Security does not confirm law enforcement operations, Collins said in a statement, but, quote, there are currently no ongoing or planned large-scale ICE operations here, reporting from the Portland Press-Herald. Back to the Senate floor. The Appropriations Committee ranking Democrat Patty Murray of Washington State said before today's procedural vote the spending bills should not advance as a group until there is an agreement about pulling out the Homeland Security Department funding portion and reforming ICE.
Democrats have been very clear. We have 5 bills in this package we would be happy to pass today on their own. We are all in agreement on funding for child care, cancer research, air traffic controllers, our troops, and more. But we have also been clear that we cannot and will not move the DHS bill without real progress on accountability. ICE and CBP are out of control, and we cannot approve that bill until common sense reforms are included. That's what the vast majority of American people are demanding, and many Republicans now also say that must happen as well. So Congress, all of us need to act. Peaceful protesters and American citizens are being targeted, detained, attacked, and killed. We have to say no to what this president is doing. So while I am very glad to see the White House and Republicans are now talking with Democrats to finalize a plan to pass the 5 bills and split off DHS, until that deal is finalized, I will be a no on this vote.
Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State, Appropriations Committee ranking member on the Senate floor before the Senate voted 45 to 55 not to advance the full 6-bill fiscal year 2026 spending package. 7 Republicans voted no with the Democrats. Bud of North Carolina, Johnson of Wisconsin, Lee of Utah, Moody of Florida, Paul of Kentucky, Scott of Florida, and Tuberville of Alabama. Also, the Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, switched his vote from yes to no. That was procedural. That will allow him to call for a revote in the future because he was on the prevailing side of the vote. PBS reporter Lisa Desjardins posting on X what could happen next. Here is the rough plan, she writes, what leaders are hoping for, that there is a deal over funding DHS short term. Then the Senate does a do-over, reconsiders the vote that just failed. That would put the 6 spending bills on the Senate floor, essentially. Then there would need to be a pretty hefty unanimous agreement to separate out DHS, pass the 5 other bills, and pass a short-term DHS bill. And she writes, what is the holdup in the Senate? Primarily, it seems to be the length of a DHS CR. Some Republicans want 6 weeks to allow deeper work on legislation over ICE, DHS issues, but some Ds, like Senator Elizabeth Warren, say those issues should take no time and should be easy. That was the post from PBS reporter Lisa Desjardins. President Donald Trump very briefly referenced the negotiations during his White House cabinet meeting.
I think we're going to have an amazing and incredible year. Hopefully we won't have a shutdown. And we're working on that right now. I think we're getting close. The Democrats, I don't believe, want to see it either. So we'll work in a very bipartisan way, I believe, not to have a shutdown. We don't want a shutdown.
NBC News writing about the White House cabinet meeting. President Donald Trump held a cabinet meeting today as his administration contends with backlash over its aggressive and deadly immigration enforcement tactics in Minnesota. Unlike past meetings, Trump did not invite Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Attorney General Pam Bondi, or some other top officials who have been drawing recent scrutiny to speak. He also did not take questions from reporters afterward. That was from NBC News. Government funding for the Department of Homeland Security and those other departments in the current 6-bill funding package runs out 11:59 p.m. Eastern Friday. Those other departments are Defense, Transportation, Health and Human Services, Labor, Education, and Housing and Urban Development. If the Senate passes a short-term extension of the Homeland Security funding, a CR, to allow for further negotiations over ICE reforms, or passes an amended version of DHS funding itself, that would have to go back to the House for another vote to be signed into law. The House is not in session this week, but Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, did answer a question today at a news conference on Capitol Hill about the House Democrats' position.
I wanted to ask you about these negotiations that are ongoing in the Senate about potentially separating out a DHS CR. I was just wondering how you're feeling about those conversations, whether you think Democrats would vote for a DHS CR with changes, and also are you involved with these discussions at all?
I've had conversations with Leader Schumer and Mike Johnson. I have had no conversation with the White House. But the White House understands that The only group of people that speak for House Democrats are House Democrats. So we'll evaluate whatever comes out of the Senate. We support the position that the 5 bipartisan bills that had strong bipartisan support in the House should be voted on, sent to the president, and signed into law promptly. The failure to do so will simply be another indication that Republicans, once again, want to shut the government down in order to try to jam their extreme right-wing policies down the throats of the American people. We know where that winds up, nowhere. And at the end of the day, many Republicans, just like it was the case related to extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which happened in the House of Representatives, despite months of them saying, my way or the highway, the same outcome is going to result this time around, because the American people know that dramatic, bold, transformative changes to the way in which the Department of Homeland Security conducts itself need to happen, and it needs to happen now. Not weeks from now, not months, not next year, not when Donald Trump finally leaves the Oval Office. It needs to happen now. So we'll evaluate whatever is sent to us, and if we're on a path to a dramatic, immediate, transformative change, then I'm sure that will be a part of what heavily, weighs into our discussion.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference today in the U.S. Capitol building in Washington. Depending upon what comes out of the Senate on temporary Homeland Security Department funding and the plan for ICE reforms, if House Democrats oppose it, then Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, may need to try to pass it with only Republican votes and deal with some conservative Republicans who do not support it. Politico writes that Speaker Johnson already is dealing with a razor-thin margin, and a special election in Texas over the weekend is expected to complicate matters. If the Democratic nominee wins, as expected, Johnson could spare only a single defection on a party line vote. House Republican leaders are set to discuss their plans Thursday afternoon, including whether they would need to call the House back earlier than currently planned Monday night. According to 2 people granted anonymity to describe private deliberations, but that will depend on how quickly the Senate can pass any agreement. Reporting from Politico. This is Washington Today. White House border czar Tom Homan, writes Fox News, vowed Thursday to remain in Minnesota, leading immigration and customs enforcement operations there, quote, until the problem is gone. Homan made the statement during a Thursday morning news conference, his first since President Donald Trump sent him to the Twin Cities earlier this week. He said the administration is working on a drawdown plan to decrease presence of federal agents in the state. The border chief said he had a very productive meeting with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison on Wednesday. Ellison agreed to notify ICE when local jails were releasing violent illegal aliens, a major request from federal law enforcement. That was from Fox News. Here is border czar Tom Homan at the news conference in Minneapolis.
So what could have been done with one person in a safety and security jail, now we got 15, 16 people out there doing it. I know that causes stress in the community. So if we get these agreements in place, that means less agents on the street. More agents in the jail means less agents in the street. This is common sense cooperation that allows us to draw down on the number of people we have here. Yes, I said it, draw down the number of people here. Because we have the efficiency and safety of the jails and the prison. Matter of fact, I have staff from CBP and from ICE working on a drawdown plan. What does that look like based on the cooperation? What does that look like based on how many targets we have less to find? In my meetings with Governor Walsh, AG Ellison, and Mayor Fry, as well as state and local law enforcement, again, I appreciate they all acknowledge that we do have federal immigration laws in this country that have been passed by Congress, and that ICE is in fact a legitimate law enforcement agency charged with enforcing those laws. We're not making this up, folks. ICE is enforcing laws enacted by Congress. They're a federal statute. That said, I'm not here because the federal government has carried this mission out perfectly. First thing I said to senior staff when I walked in here is what I told you earlier. I didn't come here looking for photo ops or headlines. I come here looking for solutions. I do not want to hear that everything that's been done here has been perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, and anything can be improved on. And what we've been working on is making this operation safer, more efficient, by the book.
White House Border Czar Tom Homan at a news conference today in Minneapolis. He also said the blame for the clashes between protesters and federal agents, and in 2 cases resulting in the shooting deaths of 2 protesters, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, lies with the Democratic elected leaders of Minnesota.
I begged for the last 2 months on TV for the rhetoric to stop. I said in March if the rhetoric didn't stop, there's going to be bloodshed. And there has been. I wish I wasn't right. I don't want to see anybody die. Not officers, not members of the community, and not the targets of our operations. For the people out there who don't like what ICE is doing, if you want certain laws reformed, then take it up with Congress. Again, ICE is making this up. They're enforcing laws enacted by Congress and signed by the President. The same laws have been on the books for the last 6 presidents I worked for.
Border Czar Tom Homan holding a news conference in Minneapolis. Guardian writing that a strike and hundreds of protests are set to take place across the country on January 30th and 31st as grassroots organizers take action against immigration and customs enforcement activity in their communities. For the first day on Friday, organizers led by several student groups at the University of Minnesota are calling for a national shutdown, which means, quote, no work, no school, no shopping, stop funding ICE. The blackout day, which many online are referring to as a general strike, is an effort to shut down the economy, organizers say. On Saturday, organizers led by the national grassroots organization 5051 will stage an ICE Out of Everywhere National Day of Action, which will include a variety of protest demonstrations and vigils in all 50 states and Washington, D.C., reporting from The Guardian. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, a Democrat, is attending the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting in Washington, D.C., and today he spoke to the mayors about federal immigration operations in his and other cities.
For those of you that have been watching the news and what's happened in Minneapolis, I'll tell you it is that bad. People's constitutional rights have been trampled. Thousands of federal agents have descended on a city that has 600 police officers. 600 police officers and somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 federal agents, ICE, and Border Patrol. People have been indiscriminately pulled off the street. Discrimination takes place only on the basis of are you Somali, are you Latino, or are you Southeast Asian? And then American citizens have been yanked away from their homes after that solely because they look like they are from Mexico or Ecuador or Somalia. That's not how we operate in America. In America, we have these foundational principles of law. We abide by our Constitution. The rule of law is not just something that you say, but it is something that we practice each and every day. And as mayors, we know that. As mayors, we operate in the reality business. It is a reality that we've got to keep people safe on a daily basis. And by the way, we do that, partnering with a number of different jurisdictions, working with our federal government. In Minneapolis, we've worked extensively with the ATF and the FBI and the DEA, the U.S. Attorney's Office, to successfully drive down crime. And despite what you may hear on different media channels, crime is down in virtually every category and virtually every neighborhood of Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a safe city. It is less safe when chaos reigns supreme. It is less safe when families do not feel comfortable going to school or buying food at the grocery store because they're worried that their very family might get ripped apart. It is less safe when we have roving bands of agents marching down the street just looking for somebody who might be concerned. And I gotta tell you, everybody is concerned when you have that kind of occupation. And so we've been very clear. The Operation Metro Surge needs to end. This kind of conduct and siege needs to stop, not just in Minneapolis. It needs to stop nationwide.
Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, a Democrat, speaking at the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting in Washington, D.C. Story from the Financial Times. Companies including Palantir and Deloitte have collectively reaped more than $22 billion from contracts with agencies at the heart of Donald Trump's aggressive immigration crackdown over the past year. Consultants, tech groups, charter airlines, and a gravel company headed by an ally of the U.S. president have been among the biggest beneficiaries of a surge in spending on immigration and customs enforcement and customs and border protection. That article from Financial Times. From the New York Times, a federal criminal complaint that was made public on Thursday accused Anthony J. Kazmierzak of assaulting Representative Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, at a town hall earlier this week in Minneapolis. He used a syringe to spray the congresswoman with apple cider vinegar and water, an FBI agent wrote in court documents. After the incident, he appeared to say, "You're splitting Minnesotans apart." That was from the New York Times. Congresswoman Omar held a news conference Wednesday night at the Carmel Mall in Minneapolis after meeting immigrant business owners and was asked about the attack.
Congresswoman Omar, any concern about doing events like this? Any fear after what happened to you last night at a town hall meeting?
Well, I think my presence here should tell you that the fear and intimidation doesn't work on me. And, you know, you and I have talked about this many a times, the president's rhetoric, the attacks from him since I've gotten into public office, from the right wing, has always been really to stop me from being in public service, to intimidate me, to make me want to quit. And my only message is it hasn't worked thus far and it's not going to work in the future.
Congresswoman.
For what happened last night, I'm wondering what, if anything, you heard from your Republican colleagues.
You know, blame is very interesting, but facts are more important. And what the facts have shown since I've gotten into elected office is that every time the President of the United States has chosen to use hateful rhetoric to talk about me and the community that I represent, my death threats skyrocket. For 4 years, since when he was in office, the first 2 years I was state rep, and the last 2 years I was a member of Congress. It was maybe my second or third week when he started attacking me. I became a freshman who nobody should have actually known I existed because I wielded no power, to having the most death threats of any member of Congress. To the point where I had to have 6 Capitol Police officers providing 24-hour detail to me and my family. He left office. Well, he was defeated. And Biden got elected. And for 4 years, it almost plummeted. Then he came back into office, and he reassumed his vitriol. And now, my death threats are the highest of the members of Congress. And last night, the man that attacked me was specifically upset that Trump's order to deport Somalis was not yielding enough deportations of Somalis. So he wanted to come get the person he thought was protecting the Somalis. Well, we are protected by the Constitution.
That's right.
I'm sorry to tell you the truth. We are protected by the Constitution. And so I do believe that the facts of the situation are that I wouldn't be where I am at today, having to pay for security, having the government to think about providing me security if Donald Trump wasn't in office and if he wasn't so obsessed with me. It is ironic that just last night he was on stage moments before I was attacked, talking about me. And then when asked about my attack, he said, I don't think about her. Does he not remember? Is he suffering from dementia?
Yeah.
How do you spend 20, 30 minutes on stage obsessing over me by name multiple times, and then moments later say, Ilhan Omar, I don't think about her.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, at a news conference Wednesday night at a mall in Minneapolis, speaking to reporters after meeting with business owners who are immigrants. In Washington, D.C., CNN reporter Kim Ellis spoke to House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, as they walked through the Capitol building about the attack on the Congresswoman.
Do you think Rep. Omar staged the attack on herself at the town hall?
I don't have any evidence to believe that's true. Look, we deal with member security issues as they arise. I called her, as I do any member who has a situation like that, and talked with her briefly. I think she felt like she had adequate protection there, and she continued her town hall. So
Trump suggested that she staged the attack on herself, though. Do you think that's appropriate?
I haven't seen any evidence to that, and we need all members to be careful. It's a dangerous time.
House Speaker Mike Johnson in the U.S. Capitol building, and that was posted by CNN reporter Kim Ellis at KARE-TV in Minneapolis, writing that data from the United States Capitol Police shows threats against Congress members, their staff, and their families have increased over the past several years. Data shows that from 2020 through 2024, there were somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 cases in the USCP's threat assessment section that includes, quote, concerning statements, behaviors, and communications. In 2025, the number climbed to 14,938. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today. You can get us as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Washington Post writing that President Donald Trump said Thursday that President Vladimir Putin has agreed not to target the Ukrainian capital and other towns for 1 week as the region experiences frigid temperatures. There was no immediate confirmation from the Kremlin that Putin has agreed to such a pause. Russia has been pounding Ukraine's critical infrastructure, hoping to wear down public resistance to the war while leaving many around the country having to endure the dread of winter without heat. That was from the Washington Post. President Trump spoke during his White House cabinet meeting today, along with his special envoy, Steve Witkoff.
Because of the cold, extreme cold, they have the same that we do. I personally asked President Putin not to fire on Kiev and the cities and towns for a week during this. It's extraordinary. It's not just like cold, it's extraordinary cold, record-setting cold. Over there, too, you're having the same. It's a big pile of bad weather, the worst. But it was, they said they've never experienced cold like that. And I personally asked President Putin not to fire into Kiev and the various towns for a week, and he agreed to do that. And I have to tell you, it was very nice. A lot of people said, don't waste the coal, you're not going to get that. And he did it, and we're very happy that they did it. That's correct. Because on top of everything else, that's not what they need, is missiles coming into their towns and cities. So I just thought I should say it. I thought it was a very good thing. And Ukraine was almost they didn't believe it, but they were very happy about it because they are struggling badly.
I think it shows, Mr. President, how you provide an overarching sort of presence in these negotiations. The Ukrainians never thought it could happen. The Russians are doing things maybe that people wouldn't give them the credit for doing, and I think it always comes down to your indomitable spirit.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a good thing. You know, if you think it's cold over here, they say in Ukraine you can add another 20% to it. It was very cold place anyway, but this was, they see numbers that were so, they'd never seen numbers like that, cold numbers like that.
President Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East and Special Envoy for Peace Missions, at today's White House cabinet meeting. New York Post writing about this announcement. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked President Trump for helping protect lives. He wrote on X, "Thank you, President Trump. Our teams discussed this in the United Arab Emirates. We expect the agreements to be implemented. De-escalation steps contribute to real progress toward ending the war." The Post article says the announcement comes as Ukraine endures a winter of darkness and desperation after repeated Russian strikes crippled power plants, heating systems, residential neighborhoods, and rail lines. There was also an update during the White House cabinet meeting today about Iran after President Trump posted Wednesday on Truth Social, "A massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. It is a larger fleet headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln than that sent to Venezuela. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary." That was the post from President Trump. Here's the president joined by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at today's cabinet meeting.
Our military is very, very strong. You may want to say something about the large fleet of ships that's heading over to the Middle East.
Well, Mr. President, you had to, like so many other cabinet members have referenced, rebuild the perception of America. And at the Department of War, that meant reestablishing deterrence. What happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Ukraine, a war that never would have occurred, what happened on October 7th in Israel, never would have happened under President Trump. So as a result, we're having to rebuild how our enemies perceive us. And when President Trump said, "We're not getting a nuclear, Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb," he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed. When he said, "We're not going to tolerate trafficking drugs anymore in our hemisphere, we treat them like the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere," he meant it, and we're executing that. When you said, Mr. President, "We're securing the border," the military was proud to do their part alongside Homeland Security to do that. Same thing with Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department, just like we did this month. No other military in the world could have executed the most sophisticated, powerful raid, not just in American history, I would say in world history. What those men did going downtown, another country, the most secure place in the most secure base in the middle of the night without anybody knowing until those simultaneous bombs dropped 3 minutes before the helicopters dropped. No other country could coordinate that. No other president would have been willing to empower those warriors that way to be that effective. And that sends a message to every capital around the world that when President Trump speaks, he means business, and we are reestablishing deterrence at the War Department, Mr. President.
Thank you. Great job you're doing.
President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at today's White House cabinet meeting. There's an article at The Guardian. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi will travel to Ankara for talks aimed at preventing a U.S. attack, as Turkish diplomats seek to convince Tehran it must offer concessions over its nuclear program if it is to avert a potentially devastating conflict. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan proposed a video conference between Donald Trump and his Iranian counterpart, the kind of high-wire diplomacy that may appeal to the U.S. leader, but would be anathema to circumspect Iranian diplomats. No formal direct talks have been held between the two countries for a decade. That was from The Guardian. There was also a report at the White House cabinet meeting today about the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, again from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and you'll also hear from President Trump.
We are in the second phase now. We've stood up for the first time, Mr. President, on your behalf, a technocratic, all Arab government. We've got the terrorists out of there, and they're going to demilitarize. They will, because they have no choice. So we expect that. Pardon me?
And now we want to get Hamas no guns, right?
Right, they're going to give it up. They're going to give up the AK-47s.
A lot of people said they'll never disarm. Looks like they're going to disarm.
President Trump and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff at today's White House cabinet meeting. A couple of stories from the Jerusalem Post. Senior Hamas official Musa Abu Marzouk said Wednesday that Hamas never agreed to disarm, casting doubt on whether the terror group will fulfill a key U.S. and Israeli demand included in the American-backed plan for post-war Gaza. And the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, for the first time on Wednesday confirmed that approximately 70,000 Gazans were killed during the Israel-Hamas war, while disputing the percentage of civilian deaths claimed by the UN and declaring that no healthy persons died from starvation. This is Washington Today. Story from The Record. President Donald Trump's choice to lead the National Security Agency on Thursday repeatedly defended a mass foreign surveillance power that is weeks away from expiring without congressional action. The testimony by Army Lieutenant General Joshua Rudd about the importance of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, could put him at loggerheads with the commander-in-chief and other national security officials, such as Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who has disparaged the foreign spying power in the past. FISA gives spy agencies broad authority to collect communications from U.S. technology firms to hunt for national security threats living overseas, but also scoops up an unknown amount of Americans' communications without a warrant. That's the story from The Record. Here's part of today's hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, asking the nominee about surveillance.
General, if you are directed to target people in the United States for surveillance, will you insist that there be a judicial warrant? And I would like to have a yes or no answer to this, and happy to have some context.
Yeah, Senator, again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you yesterday. Certainly, this question speaks to the mission of NSA and the authorities that it's been given. And what I can tell you, Senator, is that if confirmed, I will absolutely commit to executing the foreign intelligence mission of the NSA in accordance with the authorities that it's been given and within all applicable laws.
That, respectfully, though, doesn't get close to what I'm talking about. I mean, that is about as vague as anything I've heard on the subject, and it seems to me that unfamiliarity with basic constitutional rights is not something that can be accepted in this position. It's so crucial, and I continue to believe that what I described to you is not mutually exclusive. I think smart policies give you security and liberty. Not so smart policies give you less of both. So would you like to take another crack at perhaps telling me a little bit? As I said in the office, I'm interested in hearing in your words how you might deal with one of these issues, not to spell it out in text and the like, but to get a sense of how you would strike this extraordinarily important issue in a sensible way.
Well, Senator, as we discussed, I have utmost respect and commitment to the civil liberties that are outlined in the Constitution. I've sworn an oath several times throughout my career to uphold that.
Let's move on so we can get some more questions.
Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, questioning Army Lieutenant General Joshua Rudd, nominated for head of the National Security Agency at today's Intelligence Committee hearing. Senator James Langford, Republican of Oklahoma, asked the nominee about what national security threats concern him.
What do you see as the principal threats that NSA needs to be focused in on? As you look around the globe in the issues that are out there in this open setting, what would you see as some of the principal threats?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. My assessment aligns with our national security strategy and national defense strategy and how we articulate the priorities. Certainly from where I sit at U.S. Indo-PACOM, day in and day out, China, Russia, North Korea, those are all critical threats that we pay attention to, varying degrees of how we characterize those and how we prioritize those. But I think it's pretty clear that those two state actors, certainly Iran continues to pose concern and threat to the nation. I would couple alongside with that, violent extremists will be an infinite problem, and I think increasingly narcotics and narco-terrorists.
Nominee for National Security Agency Director, Army Lieutenant General Joshua Rudd, questioned by Senator James Langford, Republican of Oklahoma, at today's Senate Intelligence Committee hearing. At the start of the hearing, the Vice Chair, Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, spoke about the intersection of the intelligence community and Wednesday's FBI seizure of 2020 election ballots from the Fulton County, Georgia Elections Hub and Operations Center.
Senior officials, including the person responsible for leading our nation's intelligence community, appear willing to blur the line between intelligence and domestic political activity. There are only two explanations for why the Director of National Intelligence decided yesterday to show up at a federal raid tied to the president's obsession with relitigating the 2020 election. First, she believes there is a legitimate foreign intelligence nexus, in which case she has violated her legal obligation to keep this intelligence community and committees fully and completely informed. Or she is simply attempting to inject the nonpartisan intelligence community into a domestic political stunt designed to legitimize conspiracy theories that undermine our democracy. Either scenario represents a serious breach of trust and a dereliction of duty to the solemn office which she holds. So I'll be looking to you, among others, to ensure that we defeat real adversary efforts to mess with our elections and to help ensure that the intelligence community never allows itself to be used to advance political narratives instead of protecting domestic institutions.
Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, Intelligence Committee Vice Chair, at the start of today's hearing for the NSA Director nominee. An article from the New Republic, Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts claimed Thursday his office was raided because he, quote, stood up to Donald Trump's big lie. He said at a news conference, Fulton County has been targeted for years because I refused to bend to pressure, referring to the years of Trump-perpetuated claims that Democrats stole the 2020 general election. That's from the New Republic. And you're listening to Washington Today. The U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee, writes Reuters, which oversees commodities trading, advanced a bill on Thursday that would establish a federal regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies on a party line vote, an indication that the legislation likely lacks enough support to be passed by the full Senate. Some Senate Agriculture Committee members spoke before the vote. We start with the chair, John Bozeman, Republican from Arkansas.
As I've long said, the CFTC is the right agency to regulate the spot trading of digital commodities. This bill applies the agency's proven principles-based structure and grants its new regulatory authority to regulate the spot market trading of digital commodities. At a high level, this bill provides a clear definition of a digital commodity, protects innovation and technology, establishes consumer protection safeguards, and equips the agency with the necessary resources to take on this new responsibility. This markup is the first step in advancing market structure legislation in the Senate. Our colleagues on the Senate Banking Committee, under the leadership of Chairman Tim Scott, will advance their portion of market structure legislation in the near future, and I appreciate their hard work. Ultimately, our respective portions will need to be combined before they can move across the floor, and I look forward to working with my colleagues throughout that process. Both of our bills build upon the work done in the House led by Chairman Hill and Thompson, who last summer advanced the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, which received an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote on the House floor. In order to protect American consumers, onshore innovation, and allow U.S. businesses to continue to grow and prosper, we must grant the CFTC regulatory authority over the spot market trading of digital commodities. Advancing this bill is the first step, and there are many steps to come in achieving those goals. I also encourage the administration and Senate leadership to coordinate and ensure that the CFTC is fully constituted and adequately funded. While the CFTC is the right agency for this new responsibility and is under the excellent leadership of Chairman Seelig, it's essential to have a completely staffed, bipartisan commission, and just as importantly, the resources necessary for this large undertaking.
Senator John Boozman, Republican from Arkansas, at today's Agriculture Committee meeting, he is the chair, on the cryptocurrency regulation bill. The ranking Democrat Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota also spoke before the vote.
The progress that has been made here is good, but I think we believe that we're not quite done yet. Senator Booker and I have talked about this several times, and while the bill before us today does not yet have bipartisan agreement, I hope we can continue to negotiate as this bill moves forward. Additionally, the bill can't be considered in isolation. Parallel legislation within the jurisdiction of the Banking Committee remains unresolved, despite a lot of work that's been done on that front, and we think that that uncertainty has to be resolved. And we believe there's several key issues that must be addressed on ethics, on safeguards, regarding public officials and market participants, so that regulatory gaps aren't exploited in any way for for personal gain. Second, we have to protect the independence of the CFTC. And while I appreciate that you, Mr. Chairman, have expressed support for appointing a bipartisan group of commissioners, we can't give the CFTC this broad new authority when it only has one member, one Republican member. Finally, we have to strengthen consumer protections to ensure that customer assets are protected, conflicts of interest are mitigated, and regulatory gaps are closed. But I want to just conclude by saying I truly appreciate the countless hours of work that our colleagues, my staff, their staff, have put into these negotiations, particularly you, Mr. Chairman, and you, Senator Booker. And I look forward to working with both of you as we go forward.
The Senate Agriculture Committee ranking Democrat Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota before the committee voted along party lines 12-11 to approve the bill. More from the Reuters article. The Senate Banking Committee's companion bill has proved to be more contentious, with banks and crypto firms engaged in a bitter lobbying fight over whether crypto companies should be allowed to pay interest on dollar-pegged crypto tokens known as stablecoins. Reporting from Reuters. Wall Street today, the Dow up 55, NASDAQ down 172, and S&P down 9. President Trump told reporters today that he informed the acting president of Venezuela that commercial flights from the U.S. can now go to that country. He ordered the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy to reopen airspace over Venezuela. CNBC reporting American Airlines is planning to resume service to Venezuela from the United States for the first time since 2019, weeks after the U.S. captured Venezuela's president. World Cup soccer tournament, co-hosted by the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, begins in June. And today, the president of FIFA, the Football International Governing Organization, Gianni Infantino, spoke to the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting in Washington about what he said was a coming invasion of fans to U.S. cities.
I have an announcement to make here today, is that actually for the first time in 250 years of history of the United States of America, well, you will not just be invaded, but you will be conquered. You will be conquered by soccer, and it starts here and today. This is what will happen in the next few months. A horde of barbarians, but happy barbarians, all colored with the colors of their countries, will come and will celebrate together in peace and in joy. What will be the greatest event of mankind so far. The numbers are absolutely stunning. You might have heard some of them will have 6.5 million tickets, almost 7 million tickets for sale to fill the stadiums. We'll have many more millions coming to the United States, of course. We'll have 16 host cities, 11 of which in the United States. We'll play in Canada and Mexico as well. 104 matches will be played, and these 104 matches, to give you an order of magnitude, correspond to 104 Super Bowls in 1 month. This is what this is about. We'll have 6 billion people watching the FIFA World Cup from home on TV. This makes it the biggest event, and everyone from home or here will focus their eyes on the United States, on Canada, and on Mexico, and it will be a great celebration of humanity, a great celebration of people coming together. In the last 4 weeks, when we had a ticket sales phase, we received for these 6.5, 7 million tickets, we received 500 million ticket requests. 500 million people would like to come and watch the FIFA World Cup.
The FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, today at the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting in Washington, D.C., he said the estimated economic impact on U.S. cities from co-hosting the World Cup will be $30 billion. There's an article in the L.A. Times. The German Football Association vice president has joined others calling for boycotting U.S. World Cup matches. International leaders and diplomats expressed growing concerns about the safety of visiting the U.S. amid immigration crackdowns. And while FIFA projects record-breaking attendance and revenue, foreign visitors may stay away, impacting international tourism revenue. Some of the reporting from the L.A. Times. Governor Josh Shapiro, Democrat of Pennsylvania, was asked about this by a German reporter today as he appeared in Washington at a breakfast hosted by the Christian Science Monitor.
Hey, Juliana Schäuble from Die Zeit from Germany.
As a German, I apologize, Governor, that I want to ask you a football question, about a football question. There's a debate in Europe right now after what we've seen in the last couple of weeks in Davos, in Minneapolis, if the World Cup should be boycotted. There will be games in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. Do you understand concerns of people coming to this country, and what do you tell them?
I do understand the concerns. And I am concerned that some foreign countries will boycott the World Cup. The World Cup is an extraordinary event that many people here in the United States worked extremely hard to secure. We worked unbelievably hard in Pennsylvania, predating my time as governor and now during my time as governor, to make sure that Philadelphia would be one of those host cities and host those games. I think not only are Americans horrified by what they're seeing from the Trump administration on immigration, but across the globe, people are horrified to see what's happening in Minneapolis, and elsewhere. And I understand how that creates a worry or creates a feeling amongst some that they don't want to be seen as endorsing these tactics of the Trump administration. I think what is clear, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, is that our immigration system has been broken for years and years and years. And Republicans and Democrats both bear some blame for that. There is a clear way to move forward. What the Trump administration is doing right now is not that. What they are doing right now is violating the constitutional rights of Americans. And as you note in your question, they're also turning off the world. And that isolates America, and it makes us all less safe. So while it may just manifest itself in some folks not showing up for an unbelievably important soccer or football tournament, I would say that's just the surface. Beneath the surface, there is a much larger problem of a broken immigration system and a president seemingly want to isolate America in the world. And the more isolated we are, the more dangerous the world becomes to the United States.
Democratic Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro at a Christian Science Monitor breakfast in Washington, D.C. He is also promoting a new memoir titled Where We Keep the Light, Stories from a Life of Service. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we go, reminder that a new episode of C-SPAN's Ceasefire airs Friday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. This week, host Dasha Burns is joined by Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt, a Republican, and San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria, a Democrat, the chair and vice chair, respectively, of the U.S. Conference of Mayors for a bipartisan conversation on the top issues facing American cities. C-SPAN Ceasefire, Friday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Hope you have a good night.